I think perhaps that is the quintessential challenge that we all have, is to know that we don't walk alone. What could you not deal with if you knew that you didn't walk alone through anything? That feeling that you are alone, and that this is your own personal and private experience that you're going through that is not accompanied by this infinite love and life, then that's really the spiritual whole journey is about getting to that point, isn't it? It's about knowing that we are connected to something much greater than what appears to be. And we are seduced by the appearances of life. We have bought into them. We have convinced ourselves that the appearances of separation are not just appearances, but they are reality. And we therefore suffer because we feel separate from all that would bring us comfort. All this that we call God, infinite love and life and peace, seem to be absent from us when we're going through particularly difficult circumstances. Because what we do is we identify a sense of well-being with life going a particular way. And people thank God when they get what they want. They don't thank God when they don't get what they want, because the assumption is that somehow they've been deprived of what they want by some fickle finger of fate or some higher power, and that God is capricious. Has anyone had that experience? We have made God in our image and likeness, which is essentially when we're getting what we want, we figure God is smiling upon us and blessing us, and when we're not getting what we want, then God has somehow turned its back on us. And that results in this sort of yo-yo spiritual life. Anyone relate to that? Same three people. Now you know I have to go. I can't do this with just three people, so I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I would not be putting my hand up either. So yesterday was an amazing experience here. We had Gary and Cindy Renard. Oh my God, it was the best seminar I think I've seen in a long time, and I got to be here all day and hang out with them and have lunch with them and hang out afterwards. And when I tell you that it's really, really good and you should come, you might want to come, although I won't be saying that to you much anymore. But it was incredible in the sense that for 6 hours, essentially, they were speaking right into the heart of the truth. And if you have ears to hear, like Jesus said, if you have ears to hear, you find yourself dropping into this place where you're not even so much aware of the words that are being spoken, but it's like a tuning fork or something, like you just begin to sort of vibrate with this understanding, and you begin to feel this joy and this love and this peace. It's because when you just keep speaking the truth, that if you have any openness in you, any willingness in you to see an altered reality, it can touch you, it can reach you. And that's what spiritual awakening is all about. That's what transformation is all about. That's what Unity of Santa Barbara is all about and will continue to be about, is to help us realize and express this divine nature. Because that's the only thing that's going to make a difference in our world. When we rail against life and circumstances and feel befuddled by why life isn't going the way it's supposed to be going, and we don't get our preferences and everything, we're just arguing for this notion of being separate from God, separate from love, separate from life. And when we argue, we get the results of what we argue for. There's one of those lines from years ago. It said, if you argue for your limitations, they will be yours. And that's what we do, don't we? We argue for our limitations because we rail against life and we hope life would somehow get better, and that for us in an immature spirituality, we think that when life goes better for us, that somehow we now are, in league with the divine, that we finally got God to wake up and notice us. Like, finally, I'm getting a break here. You've been sleeping on the job. Now I will continue to pray with you. We'll pray to you. And when we do that, we're falling right into the trap of an ego, of a thought of being separate. So in these last 5 weeks that I have with you, I want to speak of what has been the most helpful to me on my spiritual path, and hopefully leave a little bit of a chronology of principles and practices that can be applied, at least from my perspective, that can be transformative and life-changing. So today we're going to talk about surrender. Now, most people, including myself, when we hear the word surrender, we go, I hate that, don't you? Surrender? It's so un-American, It's so not Western, because we associate the notion of surrender with what? Giving up. And so we have to quickly define what we're talking about here. We're not talking about garden variety surrender, which would be giving up. The white flag, like, oh, I give up. And you're in this resignation place in which you are become completely passive to whatever is happening, and you surrender as if you've been defeated. No, this is not what we're here for. What we're talking about is spiritual surrender. See, it's an inside job. You don't have to get the white flag out. You might, but only first if you've done it here. And spiritual surrender is not about giving up. It's about giving way. It's about giving way. It's about allowing life to be as it is. It's a non-anxious, courageous stance of the heart to be with life as it is. And that doesn't mean that you don't take any action. It doesn't mean that you are not motivated to do something, that there is not an action step. But it means that first and foremost, there is a sense of just being with life as it's showing up and not resisting life as it's showing up, because to do so only causes us to what? Suffer. Byron Katie, who wrote the book Loving What Is, she said, the only time I suffer is when I argue with reality. Think about that. I was working out this morning, my little mini workout that I do. I have a 7-minute workout when I can never argue that I don't have enough time. Everyone should have a 7-minute workout, and it kicks my butt every time. But there's one, it's the very last thing that I have to do when I'm already exhausted. I hate it. It's a side plank, and my arms and everything are already shaking, and I'm like, and I was noticing this morning how I was not in a state of surrender. And I had this whole commentary that was going on, like, oh, I hate this, and I think I'm going to take this out of my workout, and this is ridiculous, and why do I have to do this? And oh, this is, oh. And I thought, what are you doing? You're taking a situation, and by your attitude and your rhetoric and this mind chatter, you're making this worse. What if you just went, I'm just going to be with what's happening right now. What's happening right now is my arms are shaking, and I'm feeling some discomfort. I don't have to have an attitude about it. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to take that step. We can feel the discomfort. We can be with the discomfort, but we don't have to have this commentary, this critic, this I don't like it this way. It shouldn't be happening, because that is what causes us to stay out of the kingdom of God, to stay out of peace, to stay out of a sense of love and wholeness. And I've noticed this about myself, so I share it with you so you don't have to do that anymore. Because now you know the wise way. Right? You got it, yeah. And as it says in the book that, I think I've read this to you before, but who remembers, right? I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, but this is from Michael Singer in the book, The Surrender Experiment. It's right in the beginning. He says, life rarely unfolds exactly as we want it to. Amen? Okay, we agree. And if we stop and think about it, that makes perfect sense. The scope of life is universal. And the fact that we are not actually in control of life's events should be self-evident, right? Right. Really? Okay. The universe has been around for 13.8 billion years. How many of you were here in the beginning? And the processes that determine the flow of life around us did not begin when we were born, nor will they end when we die, right? So what manifests in front of us at any given moment is actually something truly extraordinary. It is the end result of all of the forces that have been interacting together for billions of years. We are not responsible for even the tiniest fraction of what is manifesting around us. Nonetheless, we walk around constantly trying to control and determine what will happen in our lives. No wonder there's so much tension, anxiety, and fear. Each of us actually believes, get your hands on your hips now, that things should be just the way we want them, right? Instead of being the natural result of the forces of creation. See, we laugh at it, but in the next moment, when something is happening, we will go back to that consciousness of, it's called, in spiral dynamics, it's called the green level of dynamics. It's subsistence, and it has to do with predict and control. And that's the way the ego mind, or that separated self, operates. That because life needs to be a certain way for us to be okay, then we have to be in a state of trying to figure out what's going to happen and then control so that things happen the way we want them to happen so we'll be okay. And we live in a constant state of anxiety because who can control all these spinning plates and these infinite possibilities that can be unfolding at any given moment? And even if you get one part of your life, like I got this managed really well, you know, and good luck if it's with a person, because even when you, because don't we know how unpredictable they can be? You know, and all of the forces of creation that have worked their way up to their personality and their behavior and their attitude and how they respond to you, and good days and bad days, and Denise loves me today and tomorrow she's not so nice, and blah, blah. You know, it's just an infinite variety and a myriad and a multiplicity and a diversity of possibilities, and somehow we sit in this place where we think we're in the driver's seat and that we can somehow control our life. And then if we could just do that, we'd be okay. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely maddening, and that's why they say that it's insanity to think that way. And yet, so we get to choose. And we get to choose from a place of understanding that we're not in control of this universe and how it's unfolding. Then the only choice that you and I really have that's going to make a difference is whether we come into agreement with what is happening first and foremost. Because when I come into agreement, in other words, I say, this is what is. It is what it is. When I'm in that place, then instead of being in my head, which is constantly trying to figure out, you know, how to change this and make this better, I am in a place of open-hearted receptivity. And when I'm in a place of open-hearted receptivity, then I am in touch with this infinite wisdom that can really guide me forward. Instead of, I only have one motivation in life, and that is to get what I want. Does anybody relate to this? 5 people. So, every spiritual tradition has some version of this notion of spiritual surrender. And if you realize that this is rooted in the most practical kind of teaching, it doesn't require you to believe in some theological premise that seems to be so, you know, obscure and so that you have to become so enlightened to understand this. It's just just go by your own experience. And this is what I try to do, is if it doesn't work at the level of my own experience, then I don't believe it. But it works at the level of your experience. When I come to find out that if I can be with life as it is, then suddenly I am in league with all of these capabilities. I'm in league with this infinite intelligence and this infinite love and this wisdom, because when our hearts are open, which is what happens when you and I accept life as it's showing up, then we are in touch with the divine. We are in touch with the infinite universe. But when the heart is closed, then we only can rely on this very limited mind that you and I have that sees only in part, that we judge by appearances, and we are only in touch with this conditioning that we've grown up with, that we've come to need life to be a particular way. And what a limited way to live life, and how life constantly has to be showing up in a certain way, time and time again, for us to be all right. And I can't get anyone to do what I want them to do. Have you had any luck in that area? Or the government, or the people who drive their cars in Santa Barbara, or anywhere. So if I'm going to get on with this life, if I'm actually going to find my way with the minimal amount of stress and anxiety, if I'm actually going to be able to say, I can live a life of peace, then I'm going to have to get in league with what is, what's happening. I don't have to like it, but I can't deny it. I can't push it away to pretend it's not there and argue that I've been victimized by life, because then I'm back in that small, contracted place again, and my options are so limited. What are the three? Fight? Flight? Freeze. Freeze. Fight, flight, freeze, when I'm in my limited self. But there's a fourth option. Surrender. Surrender. And again, it's not giving up, it's about giving way. And suddenly you now are connected with the whole universe, because you're just like, what the universe has already done, you're catching up. Because the universe has already accepted what has happened. No matter what it is, how horrible it is, the universe has already made space for it. If it had not made space for it, it could not arise. And when we begin to say, I am a universal human being, which means that I am in league with the universal laws of the universe, which part of which is just being, part of which is just acceptance. It's open-hearted allowing of what is happening. Not to become passive, but to become understanding that this is what it is, and to gather the forces that come when my heart is open and I'm connected with that wisdom that comes when it is. I need that book right there. The very first Unity book, Lessons in Truth. I got a signed copy here. Denise signed it for me. 1894. Did you know Denise was that old? She doesn't look it. Yeah, 1894 is when this book was published, and if you're ever looking for a quick read, but powerful, this is your one to read if you want to know what Unity teaches. So this is in the section on spiritual gifts, page 117. Oh, I'm sorry, Emily Cady. Emily spelled E-M-I-L-I-E. Emily Cady, C-A-D-Y. And she says this. Now, she's got a gender issue here, but that was then, So when you hear men, you'll know it's men, women, okay? Oh, for more men who have the courage to abandon themselves utterly to infinite will. Men, women who dare to let go of every human being for guidance and seeking the Christ within themselves. Let the manifestation be what it will. Such courage might possibly mean, and probably would mean at first, a seeming failure, a going down from some apparent success that had been in the past. But the going down would only mean a mighty coming up, a most glorious resurrection of God into visibility through you in his own chosen way, right here and now. The failure for the time would only mean a grand, glorious success a little later on. And that is the kind of success that I'm in for, right? Because that grand and glorious success is not a one-off experience. It isn't a spiritual high, or a manifestation. I got what I want. I had the treasure map, and I had this guy pictured, and now he's in my life. And look at the car I got. I just manifested that, and that's the ego's version of spiritual enlightenment. It's that you can manifest life the way you want it, and there is room for that. At the early stages of spirituality, when you think life just happens to you and you have no control or choice. But as we evolve in our understanding, that we know that it isn't about getting God or the universe to give us what we want. It's about us being available to the infinite will and the love and the life of God so that it can manifest through us, so that it can be the constant experience that it can accompany life when we're getting what we want and life when we're not getting what we want. And isn't that the most glorious success that we could possibly have? Yes? Yes. Who's interested in a conditional peace or a conditional love? We argue for it all the time. We try to navigate our way to circumstances that will give us that. And yet, time and time again, we're disappointed. I am. Are you? Because I just can't control that many people all the time in the circumstances of life. It's just a giant, roulette wheel, and just never know where it's going to stop. I'm getting what I want. Ooh, I'm not getting what I want. I'm getting what I want. I'm not getting what I want. And that is the dualistic, I'm happy, I'm sad. It's what Jesus said, don't judge by the appearances, but by righteous judgment. And righteous judgment is no judgment at all. Not from the mind. It's a righteous understanding of our connection with this infinite love of God that can pervade and can bolster us and can hold us, it can comfort us, it can strengthen us through whatever arises. That's the glorious success of the spiritual life. And it comes if we can abandon ourselves utterly, if we can let go of every human being for guidance and seek the answer from within ourselves. We ask the truth of us. We ask the Christ of us, our Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. It's something greater than that personal will, which is so dependent, so codependent, so much used to having life be needing to be a particular way. And that is immaturity. And when we see it in children, we say, oh, well, someday you'll grow up and you'll find out that life always doesn't go your way. You've said that to children. But now we have to speak to the inner child, the child that I am at times, that just wants what I want. Anyone else? All of us. I like what Michael Beckwith says on the subject. And he kind of distinguishes this thing between, in my article this week, I said, hands-on or hands-off. This notion of how does one live one's life? Is it, hands-on, I'm in control, and I'm going to go where I want to go, and it's a sort of rugged, individualism, and take life, take it by the horns and get what you want and go after it. And is that the way, or is it hands-off? And it's more subtle. It's never one or the other. But he says, visioning versus visualization. So he says, visioning lets the presence of God use us. Let God use us. It's the difference between saying, there's a power for good in the universe and I can use it, which is sort of like using this infinite power to create the world that we want in terms of our preferences, which of course are so enlightened, right? They only consider us. And saying, there is a power that can use me. There's a power that can use me. And when I know, when I'm in the consciousness that there is a power that can use me, then I'm letting go of what it's supposed to look like, because I know that the infinite intelligence will take me there if I have that willingness to let it. And if I don't have the willingness to let it do that, if I prescribe how life is supposed to be, then I'm in deep doo-doo. Even if I think I'm so right. Have you ever been so right? You knew you were so right, but what you didn't account for was the whole scheme of things. Because how could you possibly entertain all of the iterations of a decision, of an action? When it comes from the personal will, most likely it's the wrong decision. It's very much like driving with me in a car. I have a terrible sense of direction. And this is your spiritual leader who's guiding you. Denise has an impeccable sense of direction. Now, this is hard for an ego, that Denise is always right. I'm getting a little bit better, but 9 times out of 10, I need to surrender to the higher understanding of which way to go. And if I say, no, I want this one. Does anyone? I don't care that you usually get it right. I want to get my sense of power here. We need to go left. Denise says, no, we need to go right. Quiet, we're going left. And then block after block after block, there's a recognition. I don't think this is the right way. I don't remember. What did you say? I said we should go right. And of course, she was right. And that's pretty much what it comes down to. We can feel, this sort of strength, like I got my way and I'm going this way. But is it connected to the highest and the best guidance we can get? And what surrender says is, I really think I know what's best here. But not my will. Thy will be done. And then listen. And when we thought we should have gone left, we may end up going right and have no understanding of why the heck we're going in the seemingly wrong direction, until the unfolding of events reveals to us that there was a bigger plan. It encompassed a larger and deeper understanding, for which we have now surrendered ourselves, and now we are in league with the universe. Now we are, instead of in the way of God, we are the way of God. And that's what moves us to the place that we always have wanted to be. We never really wanted to get our way. We just wanted to get what we deeply wanted, which is peace, which is love. And there's only one voice that speaks that guidance. So, that voice has said to me recently, it's time to move on, to move away from church ministry. And, oh yes, there's lots of other voices that have, come in to play their part in this choral arrangement. And yet, when I check in, when I stop worrying and being anxious and saying, yeah, but what about this and what about that? And I can quiet my mind and say, is this still true? And it says quietly, yes. And sometimes we have to get quiet, because in the raging voice of the ego, it seems like there's no ears to hear that still small voice that speaks the truth. And that's what meditation and that's what prayer is all about, to quiet the voice of the busy, discursive, thoughtful of the mind so that we can listen and discern the voice of the Spirit, of the truth of who we are. And when we listen, it unerringly will lead us to what we really, really want. And that is not a destination or a person or a circumstance or a situation, but it is more bringing us back to who and what we truly are. And when we come back to more than who, what we truly are, the universe will respond in kind to bring us the circumstances and the conditions which mirror that understanding, that enlightened understanding of who we are. Instead of us constantly chasing people and circumstances in order to finally feel that, we're okay. We stop that and we go to the source and ask for the truth of who we are. And then what comes from that is going to guide us to the highest and best. And so I trust and I know that for myself, and I haven't always done it, and when I haven't done it, there's been collateral damage, yeah? And there's been wrong turns. And Denise and I bought a house one time. I don't know, 15 years ago or something. We bought a house and we were just trying to make this deal happen. Is anyone, you want something so bad, and all these red flags were coming up, and we kept pushing through them, and the bank was asking for everything. They wanted to know my blood type and everything. It was like, enough already. And who did you date back in 1968? It's like, I think this is unreasonable. That's okay, we want this house. Just keep doing it. And we did it, and we ended up buying this house at the top of the market, and then had to sell it at the crashed market. And Denise and I reflected on that, and I said, we just made that happen, didn't we? We just pushed through. There were so many things that we were out of peace with, and we just thought, we're going to ride this gravy train into this great appreciation that's happening in California. And that was just one example of many. But you have your own story. And I would just say, this is not complicated. But it's difficult because at times that voice of what you want will be so loud that it will be hard for you to stop and listen. But that's exactly what the spiritual, mature person does, is before they leap, they listen. That's all I have for you today. Thank you.